On this episode of Project 1114, we put the final touches on our 91 Mitsubishi Galant VR-4. Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project 1114. On this episode, we're going to go ahead and do spark plugs and wires, a new valve cover gasket, fuel filter, and change out all the drivetrain fluids. Maybe some other odds and ends, maybe a little paint touch-up and trim work. But anyway, we're real close to finishing this project. Let's go ahead, take it home. Now to tackle these spark plugs and wires, what we're gonna go with is tried and true stuff. So the NGK wire set. I've run these on performance versions, stock versions. This is the set to go with, guys. As far as plugs go, this is a stock application, so we're just using some NGKs, and we're gonna be using the BPR 6ESs. Now, you can go a step colder if you're running a bigger turbo, more boost, or a performance application, but since we're just doing a stock build here, these are the plugs that you want to be using. We're not going to need anything too fancy to do this job, guys. I just use my standard 3/8 inch ratchet with an extension, and I've got a couple of these 6-inch extensions to help us reach down the plugs. 10mm to get these bolts off if your engine still has this spark plug and plug wire cover installed, and then you're going to need a 13/16 spark plug socket to get the spark plugs out of the engine. Let's get it done. There we go, we got some older BPR 6ESs, exactly what we bought to replace, so that's awesome. They don't look too bad, they just look old. And our new plugs that are gonna go in, much more fresh than the old ones. Let's throw them in. And time for our plug wires. Again, you notice I do one thing at a time. I take a plug out, I put a new plug in. I take a wire off, I put a new wire on. That way I don't get messed up, even though it is pretty straightforward. And that's it, guys. That's it for spark plugs and wires on the Galant VR-4. Obviously, I'm going to pull the valve cover anyway, but I just wanted to get this situated. Now, if you don't have anything else taken apart in your car, you can go ahead and start it and see how she runs to make sure we're good to go on everything. So we're looking at our valve cover now. We've got our new plug wires, we've got our new plugs installed, and now it's time to do this valve cover gasket. So I'm going to give you a couple tips right now before I actually do the process. You do need to remove the upper timing belt cover. We already have this off because we did the plugs. There is usually a center plastic piece, so that's good. And then we have all these bolts around the outside of the valve cover. These are all 10mm, super easy stuff. Big thing, guys, on reinstallation, go easy. I think the setting is like 11 to 14 inch-pounds. You can easily crack these valve covers. It's very easy, seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of used ones floating around with the cracks. They'll crack in areas between the bolts. You do not want that, because then you're gonna have oil pooling in here. And that's an indicator. If you have a DSM or any other 4G63 powered car and you have a lot of oil pooling in here, believe it or not, a lot of times that isn't from just filling the oil and spilling it. It is actually coming up through cracks in your valve cover. So it's time to replace your valve cover if you're seeing a lot of that. A couple other things of note: disconnect the hoses from the PCV, which is what's right up here. And then you have a breather tube right here. You can easily just disconnect that hose too. So let's go ahead, get this valve cover off. What you're gonna need to do to replace it is have another valve cover gasket. That one's obvious. You are gonna use some RTV when putting this back together. Now, choices for RTV. These are the two most popular, the Ultra Black and then the Ultra Gray. And I don't wanna be picky or say one's better than the other. I've always used, I've tended to use Ultra Gray. I have used Ultra Black successfully. I've used Honda Bond. I've used all the different rainbow colors you can get. We're going to use ultra gray in this application, but ultra black also works fine, guys. You're not using a lot of it. This isn't a valve cover where you need to coat the whole valve cover gasket. You're really just doing this half moon piece, which you can see on the side of your engine, on the passenger side. You're going to put some RTV under there to help it seal to the engine. And then on this side, you're going to have two cam lobes where the valve cover actually goes up a little bit. You're going to do the corners of those, and I'll point them out when we get to them in the video. You're just going to put a little dab. Don't go crazy. If you use too much RTV, it actually makes it leak a lot easier because the RTV won't last as long as the rubber gasket. So don't introduce leaks into your system. Just RTV where I said on the half moon section and the two cam lobes, and you should be good to go. So let's go ahead and get this valve cover off. Now, if it's been a while since your valve cover's been removed and it's not budging just by picking up or grabbing back here, I like to give it some good working over with a rubber mallet. Give it good taps, especially around the corners. I mean, don't dent your valve cover, obviously, but just work your way around the seam. Sometimes this old RTV, there we go, becomes almost like a glue when it hardens so much. It's probably been a long time since someone's been under here. Oh my God, yeah, that was on there hard. All right, there we go. Now, if this is the first time that you're looking under the head or inside the head of your newly acquired Galant VR-4 or DSM, some things you are looking for here are any obvious deformations of the head itself where the valve cover meets. This one is extremely clean. Usually there's a couple nicks here and there, but this one's extremely clean. You're also looking for this golden color throughout. That's a great indicator that the oil was changed often. I've opened valve cover gaskets before and just seen like a really sludgy mess in here. That's indicative that someone was using the wrong oil sometimes, or just was really poor about staying on top of their oil change intervals. So very nice golden color. Cams look to be in good shape. No obvious issues there. Looks pretty nice under here. So we're gonna remove this half moon piece too, this little plastic piece. If you bought a quality valve cover gasket kit, it should have came with a new one anyway. So we'll pop him off. And you can see here now that we're under here, these are the spots where you're gonna put the RTV. So where these little lobes connect, here and here. Sometimes put a little bit on the corners, doesn't hurt. And then right around this lobe in the half moon section does get its own thin layer of RTV. Don't go crazy with the stuff. There are stories where the RTV chunks fall into your valve train. That is not good. And I also want to clean this mating surface. You can see where the other gasket left a mark. So we'll just take some Scotch-Brite pads and scrub that clean just to ensure we have a good fit. But yeah, looks great under here. This isn't a bad idea either. When I have the valve cover off and I'm cleaning it up and getting it ready to reinstall and put the new gasket on, I just go ahead and cover the engine. You don't want anything getting in there. Next, we're gonna go ahead and replace this fuel filter. Always a good idea to do that. You never know how long it's been on there for. Super easy. How I like to do this is break the fuel line sections. There's a lower and upper, an in or an out, as you can have it. You wanna do those first while it's still connected to the car. Those are the bolts that break loose the hardest. You're gonna have a 14 down here underneath, and you're gonna have a 19 on top. Then you want to go ahead and remove these 12 millimeters on either side. You can pull the whole unit out. Now, of course, you want to pull the fuel pump fuse, start the car, and let it die so you won't have any pressure in the system. But if your car has been sitting for an extended period of time, over time fuel systems do lose their pressure, so you shouldn't have any issue there. But just to be safe, when you crack these loose, always wear eye protection, always be cautious, and have a drip pan. Let's go ahead and take this off. Got a replacement fuel filter here, pop it open. Make sure it physically matches the one you're replacing, and this is a perfect match. I have a lot of luck with the Wix units. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna swap this bracket over to here, just a 10mm bolt, get this on here, and then we'll hook our lines back up. Pretty much just the opposite of taking the unit out, putting the new one in. We're gonna just drop it in. We will be doing the side bolts first, the two 12mm, so we can get it stable to connect the major fuel lines. A brand new fuel filter on our VR4. Ba-ching. Time to do fluids on the Mitsubishi Galant VR4. And this is a debate as old as time itself. What fluids do you put in which components of the drivetrain? Are you gonna go ahead and put some weird formulaic mishmash potion mixture for the transmission? Everybody's got their own opinions, guys, their own little formulas they try out. But here's my tried and true. I've been working on these cars since 2004. So never blown up the transmission, never ruined a rear end. So, and this is the easiest way to do it, guys. MT90 by Redline goes in the transmission. I don't give specific measurements because that seems to trip people up too. I use the old tried and true method of draining it first and then pumping in as much till it starts to come out the fill hole and then sealing it back up. So MT90 in the trans. Now the heavy duty shockproof is gonna go into the transfer case and the rear diff. Keep it easy, guys. If you want to use any other combination, go for it. Sure, whatever. But I'm just telling you what I know. This stuff works great. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to walk you guys through how to fill up each item, whether it be the transmission, or we're going to fill the transmission, the transfer case, and the rear diff. So let's give this car some new fluids. All right, guys, we're looking at the transmission first. That's where we're going to start off. You have your 17mm fill bolt right here. And at the bottom you have a 24mm drain bolt. Some advice, do not do your drain bolt first and drain all the fluid, because if you cannot get this 17mm fill bolt out, you will be stuck. You will not be able to drive your car. So that's gonna be advice. I give it on all my videos, but go ahead and do it for the transfer case and differential. So go ahead, crack the 17mm loose first, then we'll crack the 24, drain the fluid, and then I'm gonna show you how I rig up a tubing and funnel system to fill the transmission. After successfully draining all the transmission fluid and remembering to put the drain plug back in, here's my situation. I have a funnel rigged up to some tubing going right into the fill hole, so it should be pretty straightforward. It's time to add our MT90. We're gonna put, I think it's around 2 quarts, but again, we're gonna go until the fill hole starts to overfill and spill out. So this one's pretty easy because you can see right down there. At least you can now because I have so much stuff off the front of the engine. But yeah, you're just gonna keep peeking under there, and when it starts to come out, you stop. And then once it starts overflowing the fill hole, jump below and put the 17mm fill bolt back in and go ahead and tighten that bad boy up. And you're done with the transmission. Here we are at the transfer case in the Galant. Pretty much same story as the transmission here, folks. We got the 17mm fill. Just come back here a little bit to the big old 24mm drain plug. We're gonna go ahead and put the Redline heavy duty shockproof in here. What was crazy is when I pulled the fill plug off the transfer case, a ton of fluid just came pouring out, which means it was certainly overfilled. The other interesting thing is that the fluid coming out is the exact same fluid that was in the transmission, so not sure if this car was taking like a quick lube or whatever, but that's not a good thing at all. I know the car hasn't been driven much, so that's cool. I'm gonna drop the drain plug right now, see what comes out. So let's go ahead and drop this and try not to wear too much of it. Yeah, look at that, folks. It's like maybe just regular manual transmission fluid. It's almost like engine oil. It's so thin. There's no metal in it, so that's a good thing. Wow. Okay. Oh, time to put some real transfer case fluid in here. Time to pour the heavy duty shockproof into the transfer case. This stuff pours slow, so make sure you're patient and try to get your funnel and hose as vertical as you can. And just like we did with the transmission, once that fluid starts to flow out of the fill hole, you can see that nice thick pink heavy shockproof gear oil there. Go ahead, finger tighten the fill plug here, like so. Clean up this extra spillage here, and then just tighten up, torque to spec, and you're done with the transfer case. Time to do the rear diff. Pretty much the same theory here, except they mixed it up a little bit. The fill and drain plugs, fill, drain, are both 24 millimeters in this case, so no smaller fill. So for this guy, it's a little tricky to get a funnel to. So if you have a pump and you're comfortable doing it that way, and it's a pump that doesn't make a huge mess, go ahead and knock it out that way. Okay, so same deal as before on this car. With the transfer case, it looks like they used manual transmission fluid, a really thin fluid. You can see it coming out of the fill hole there. It looks a little bit overfilled too because it's been dripping for a little while before I turn the camera on, so you just want to pay attention with these cars. You know, you can make it a short time on that kind of fluid, but these diffs and transfer cases really need something with a little more protection than that. So if you take your car to like a quick lube place, that's on you. I'd make sure they put the right fluids in at least. So we're gonna obviously let this fully drain. I'll do the drain plug next. Put that red line heavy duty shockproof in. All right, we're gonna do a little something for the rear diff. I've got a fluid pump here that I like to use. Nice and simple design. You put one hose into your fluid of choice, which will be the heavy duty shockproof in this case. You pump, it extracts the fluid from there, pushes it through that other tube up into our diff. So same theory as before, we're gonna pump that, fill it, till it starts to flow out of that fill hole, and we'll know we're good. Let's go ahead and get this going. Go ahead and finger tighten the fill bolt there. Then we'll go ahead and torque it down to spec. You can see that little bit of fluid coming out, perfectly filled. Nice and easy with the pump. Done with the mechanicals, time to do some beautification on the exterior of the Galant VR-4. Now I've never seen this on another Galant, and this is obviously a California car its whole life, but you can see the trim here is pretty faded. So this is the exterior door trim. I've never seen it this bad, so this definitely needs another coat of trim paint for sure to pretty it up. And it's really bad. I mean, it's almost gray to white at this point. The other area I want to touch about is on Galant VR-4s. A lot of times you will see these chrome corners, and a lot of people keep their cars like that, but it's supposed to be black. The rest of it just happens to be rubber and plastic, and they put metal in these corners to kind of, I don't know if it was the only way they could get something that bent and didn't shrink or whatnot, but you can see right here, you can see the black paint is faded. So those usually need a good respray, and that'll help the car look good. Because there isn't a lot of chrome on this car. Yeah, badges and the side stripe there, but aside from that, there's not a lot of chrome. So I'm gonna make these satin trim black again, as well as these doors, and this will make the car look a lot nicer. I think this is one of those small steps that really cleans up a car. The next step, we're gonna take a green Scotch-Brite pad, go ahead and scuff up the surface just a little bit. That's gonna help with the paint adhesion. I mean, that is seriously faded through there. I haven't even scuffed this up yet. Look, it's almost white. Never seen that in the Galant. A lot of California sun damage, but I'll take it over rust any day. So go ahead and just continue to scuff it up. You don't have to go too hardcore here, just enough to help that paint stick. All right, after we prime and put a few coats of paint on, you can see how nice and smooth it is. It does have a nice satiny, low sheen to it, kind of like the OEM paint would have. So it looks fantastic compared to that awful faded look. Now when you do use your paint, you don't want to use just a regular, any old can of satin spray paint. You want to grab something that is trim and bumper specific, because these products will have some kind of anti-UV protection. Regular spray paint does have a tendency to fade really quick. So using something like this that's more flexible, goes on a lot cleaner, and will protect against sun fade is the way to go. You don't want to have to do this every year. So buy a quality trim and bumper paint. That's my advice to you, any brand that offers it. But yeah, you can, turn your VR4 faded trim into something nice. Like you can see here, this is gonna look wonderful.